Happy Tuesday, readers. Today for our reading workshop, you're going to need your copy of The Tiger Rising. You have a digital copy that's attached to today's lesson, your reading notebook, as well as your Tiger Rising book packet. We're going to go ahead and start with our reading notebook. So we're going to turn back to last week's lesson. We have been focusing on our better understanding of our characters. Last week, we were reaching for precise language to describe our characters, knowing that sometimes one word won't suffice, that we might have to come up with a statement or description of who our character is. So today we're going to be moving on to page 40, and we're going to be talking about how our characters can be complicated. So let's go ahead and turn back to our table of contents, and we're going to write our number 40. And we're going to title this lesson, Finding Complications in Characters. And today is 9-29-20. Remember, at any point you can go ahead and pause the video and push play when you're ready to continue. Make sure that you're keeping yourself organized and that you are keeping up. We're going to go ahead and turn back to page 40. And we're continuing our unit on looking deeper into our characters. So if you just flip back to some of our previous lessons to remind yourself that we have started this unit on looking at our story elements and understanding that our author provides us with a detailed setting to help us start creating a mood and a tone for the place that the story is going to be taking place in. And then we talked about the differences between what we call a character trait and then physical traits and how those are used to help us start understanding who our character is. But then we started digging a little deeper as fourth grade readers and knowing that we have to start generating what we call defensible ideas about our characters and their actions and how this might start revealing who they might be on the inside. And we looked for some patterns of those actions. We then started making a list of things that are going to be important for us to keep in mind when we read about our characters, and then how we use those ideas to develop what we call significant ideas. So realizations and how we can then look at the desires of our characters. So today we're going to be talking about how we can find complication in our characters. And readers, ever since we began this unit, I've been paying close attention to the characters that I've had in my own books. Something interesting that had happened in my book when I was reading this weekend. For many of the pages, I've been waiting for a villain, and this villain is a really bad guy, and he's a murderer of the defenseless, kind of unforgivable bad, to come to an end that he really deserved. But my author is pretty tricky. Last night, I turned a page, and the author started giving me flashbacks that showed me the villain's past. I see the guy growing up without parents, and I see teachers and kids treating him cruelly, and you know what? You are not going to believe this, but I'm starting to kind of feel sorry for the guy. I've even seen him deep down inside as maybe kind, and I'm starting to think he needs this new chance. Can you believe that? The same person who just said, I really wanted this villain to perish, now wants to give him another chance. This got me thinking. We've been talking about the fact that these authors create characters on purpose. Authors not only create characters on purpose, they also get readers thinking one thing about the character on purpose, and then authors will blow our minds on purpose by showing us that the character is actually more complicated than we thought. In the best books, characters are not easy to figure out. So you might be thinking one way about a character, but then you turn a page and it kind of shows you a brand new side. Today, I want to teach you that characters are complicated. They aren't just one way. Characters may be one way in one setting or in one relationship and another way in a different context. Or they may be one way on the outside and another way on the inside. Good readers look for text evidence, that shows this complexity to build solid ideas about our characters. So if I had to describe one of my students, I wouldn't be able to package you into a few neat little words. I know that you're one way on the playground, another way in math class, another way with a different teacher, and probably a totally different person when you go to visit your grandma for Thanksgiving. I could never fit you into the first few words that come to my head. Right now, I want you to think about what you might be like with your siblings or even maybe your cousins. I want you to think about how would you describe the type of person you are in that situation with the people that you're closest to. I want you to then think, how are you on the first day of school after a long summer break when everything and everyone is new and you don't know what to expect? You are many different people wrapped up into one person. These different circumstances and different people that surround you bring out very different parts of you. I want you to think about Mrs. Ling and who you think Mrs. Ling is. I'm going to create a quick little T-chart because I want to show you an organized way to show who Mrs. Ling is in the classroom. So I'm going to write in the classroom on one side of my T-chart, and then who Mrs. Ling is in the kitchen. You do not have to write this down on a sticky note. You can just listen. So Mrs. Ling in the classroom. Let's think. What kind of person am I? Well, in the classroom, I try to be prepared for anything that Mrs. Ling can encounter. I might be able to predict what I think my students will say and do because I've had many, many years of experience. And I'm also responsible. I make sure that I do everything that I say I'm going to do, and I prepare for those things. Another one could be I'm organized. I like to know where my things are and to be able to help my students understand what's expected of them. So in the classroom, I have 4 ways that I could be described as myself. But when I'm in a different situation, such as in the kitchen, when I'm baking with my kids or I'm making dinner, I'm a completely different person. So I could maybe describe myself at times with being in the kitchen as disorganized. I could maybe also think of, well, I can't usually find everything I want right away, so can't find things. And I'm not always able to predict. So not able to predict problems that I might encounter. So sometimes we have to think on our toes and try to be problem solvers, but I wasn't able to always predict what I might have encountered. So when you look at my T-chart, just describing who Mrs. Ling is, I'm a very different kind of person in different settings. I am one way in the classroom as a teacher, but I'm kind of a completely different person when it comes to being in the kitchen, and I am yet the same person on the outside. Readers, if someone saw me in this classroom and then they walked into the kitchen, that person might not recognize that it's actually the same person. In my classroom, I'm the optimum of organized, and then in the kitchen, however, it's a different story. I often forget to shop for the necessary ingredients for some of our baking goods and forget something's in the oven until it's too late. So I'm not just one way. You might call me organized, and that's true for the teaching setting, but I'm not in the kitchen. Today we're going to be making a T-chart about our characters. So today we're going to be making a T-chart to describe who Sistine is. So I want you at the top of page 40 to write Sistine, and we're going to create an anchor chart. So the anchor chart is going to have a T-chart on it that we're going to show Sistine in 2 different settings. On the left side, I want you to title this portion of our T-chart with people who aren't friends. And in a minute, I'm going to be reading a part of our passage that reveals Sistine. But first, I want you to remember earlier scenes of Sistine. And I want you to remember that she tore into those bullies on the playground. And I want you to think about who you think she is in that setting. You might say that she is considered tough. You could also say that possibly she's a little bit bossy. But I want you to also think about when she told Norton and Billy it isn't her fault that they don't have nice clothes. Then another time she told her class she is from Philadelphia and she hates the South. What do you think about her? You might say that she's fancy because of the clothes she wears. You might say that she's proud of where she comes from. You might even say that she seems a little angry at times. I'm going to be reading a portion of our story, and I want you to listen and start formulating what other words we could use to describe who Sistine is. So I'm going to go back to chapter 12, and I want you to listen. We got to walk through the woods, Rob said. He looked doubtfully at Sistine, bright dress and shiny black shoes. You can give me some of your clothes to wear, she told him. I hate this dress anyway. And so he took her to the motel room, and there Sistine stood and stared at the unmade beds and the tattered recliner. Her eyes moved over his father's gun case, and then went to the macaroni pan from the night before, still sitting on the hot plate. She looked at it all the same way she had looked at the Kentucky Star sign and the motel and him, like she was trying to add it up in her head. Then she saw his carvings, the little wooden village of odd things that he had made. He had them all on a TV dinner tray beside his bed. Oh, she said. Her voice sounded different, lighter. Where did you get those? She went and bent over the tray and studied the carvings, the blue jay and the pine tree and the Kentucky Star sign, and the one that he was particularly proud of, his father's right foot, life-size and accurate right down to the little toe. She picked them up one by one and then placed them back down carefully. Where did you get them? She asked again. I made 'em, said Rob. She did not doubt him, as some people would. Instead, she said, Michelangelo, the man who painted the Sistine ceiling, he sculpted too. You're a sculptor, she said. You're an artist. So students, as we just read that particular passage, we were learning a different side of Sistine. Previously, when we looked at with how Sistine acted with people who weren't considered her friends, she was tough, bossy, fancy, and proud, and even angry at times. But when we were just reading about this experience she was having with Rob, who is considered her friend, she was starting to act a different way. So we're going to look at our character chart, and on the right side of the T-chart, we're going to be labeling once she and Rob were friends. And I want you to think about how would we describe who she is in this situation. So you might say, well, she kind of sounds down to earth. She might even be considered kind. We might even think that she's considered trusting and possibly even honest. So you have discovered that Sistine in different circumstances is different people. Sistine sure isn't just one way, is she? You remember that an author makes a character on purpose. The author, Kate DiCamillo, made Sistine complicated on purpose. And right now, I want you to think about a character you've been following in your independent book as you're reading each day. And ask yourself, what's my main idea about this character? I want you to say to yourself, but what you discovered about your character, is that always considered to be true? I want you to think about times when that character is not that way. Are there places and relationships, times when the character acts differently? Does your character, like Sistine, have a different side? Today, as you read, I want you to think about your characters in your story. Are they complicated? And how can you describe who they are in different situations? Using our character chart, I want you to come up with a statement that describes Sistine. We're going to be writing the statement together, and you're going to fill it in with the specific details. So we're going to start the statement in the book, The Tiger Rising. And we're going to underline that title. So in the book, The Tiger Rising, I know that and then you're going to tell me which character you're focusing on. If you're using the information in our chart, you would fill in the word Sistine. So I know that blank is more than one way. On one hand, I know, and then you can use the pronoun he if you're describing Rob, or she if you're describing Sistine. So I know that blank is more than one way, period. On one hand, I know is, and then you're going to use one of the words describing who they are in one situation, comma, but on the other hand, I know, and once again, a pronoun, so he or she is, and then the second word to describe from the second side. So in the book, The Tiger Rising, I know that this is going to be one of the characters, Sistine or Rob, is more than one way. On one hand, I know he, if you're talking about Rob, or she, if you're talking about Sistine, is, tell me a word to describe the character in one situation. But on the other hand, I know, this is another pronoun, he or she, depending on if you're talking about Rob or Sistine, is, and this is your last description of describing who the character is in a second situation, so in a different situation. So fill in the appropriate information in your sentences to describe our characters and how we are describing our characters being complicated today. Once you're done with today's lesson, go ahead and listen to chapters 21 and through 25 that is posted in your ELA folder. Then come back and you're going to begin your next pages in your book packet. So because we're moving on to our next few pages, you are going to be numbering those pages in your book packet. So we are on the Dictionary Detective for chapters 21 through 25, which you're going to label as page 17. Then you're going to flip the page and label page 18 for the vocabulary study, page 19 for understanding the study or story, and then the final page for this section is chapter summary, which is page 20. So you're going to listen to chapters 21 through 25. Then you're going to begin working on those 4 pages. Remember, they are not due today. The 4 pages will be due tomorrow. When you're done with today's lesson, the page you are going to take a picture and submit is of the T-chart and your completed sentences at the bottom.